Hello, folks, and welcome back to another edition of the Daily Crypto Byte. Today is Friday, September 10th. Hope you all had a great week. We've got some interesting price action going on for Bitcoin right now, retesting some very critical levels, some moving averages there that really could dictate this weekend's price action. So we'll dive into that and a whole lot more. But before we do, Doc, Solana, CJ, how are you guys doing today?
I'm doing well. I wish I had more Solana, but oh my gosh, this one's just, we've talked about it on the show. You guys have talked about it, and how, it's just been all over the place. I mean, it's down 11% today, but what a week and what a 24 hours for it. I mean, in the last 24 hours, Solana was 175. It's near that low right now, all the way up to 203 just in the last 24 hours. That's pretty awesome for, what has become one of the most watched and traded cryptos right now.
That was a very nice evil laugh. I've not heard that before. Kind of Bond villain-esque. But
yeah, Dr. Solana, I could definitely.
Patch.
Yeah, Dr. Solana, that could definitely be a Bond villain in like 10 years when Solana hits 10K. But yeah, lots of interesting stuff today, like I hinted at the start of the show. CJ, some moving averages for Bitcoin being tested, and I really think that could set up this weekend's price action. You want to dive into some charts and take a look at those levels?
Yeah, definitely. I do want to recap a little bit about what happened this week, as we generally like to do on Fridays. Just a couple key takeaways. Substantial leverage wiped out this week. Roughly 1.2 billion of longs. Selling was done by young coins. Long-term holders seem unfazed. Their holdings actually increased during that capitulation event. Whales have bought an additional 44,000 Bitcoins, about $2 billion this week, including an uptick during that liquidation cascade on Tuesday. And exchanges are down another 25,000 Bitcoins this week, about 1.1 billion in terms of Bitcoin flowing from exchanges to cold wallets. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I think it still bodes for like a bullish view in the long term. Doesn't mean we can't retest 42K and not see that kind of auto rally in the interim. I guess I'll just kind of get a little ahead of myself and say, like, I don't have a Doge of the day to go over today, but I do want to highlight some charts that can give us a little context to a little bit more of this liquidation and where the coins have actually flown or flowed. So starting off here, I want to show this chart about estimated leverage ratio on all exchanges and how we can be a little bit more prepared next time for a potential liquidation phase. And you can see they're pretty clear on this chart. This last one we had on July 26 was a short squeeze that essentially led us up to about 42K. And then the leverage was pretty consistent all throughout the uptrend until the end here where we really started to peak up. And then, of course, that's where a large majority of the leverage longs were actually flushed out of the market. So when we see this leverage starting to increase and pick up, it doesn't mean it has to lead to a massive liquidation, but I think just something that we should be a little bit cautious about and be aware of. Another instance has to do with the funding rates of perpetual futures. When we see funding rates drastically increasing when they've been relatively steady over the course of time, that is another clue that we should just be a little bit cautious. And this chart it's a little bit difficult to see, but this teal line is indicative of the futures perpetual funding rates. Another way to visualize that is through this one. We can see funding rates of all exchanges, and we can see that massive peak in green inflows and that funding coming into futures perpetuals. So I think that those are kind of just a little bit of a warning sign that we can watch for in the future to guard against any potential long liquidations. And then finally, we are looking for that auto rally in kind of a similar schematic as this. Yesterday, when we were looking at kind of the Bitcoin chart, haven't really seen it yet, but we're still kind of finding support and not really seeing a lot of volume or momentum to the downside or the upside at the current point. So with that being said, I'll pass it back to you, gentlemen.
Good stuff, CJ. Thank you for that. And I do just want to quickly add one thing in the Bitcoin charts, because I agree. This was a really interesting week in terms of capital shifting hands. And like I keep saying, I think that today's price action really could set us up for an interesting weekend here. So, like you pointed out, CJ, we're hitting some support here for Bitcoin. Two very critical levels, in my opinion. One being this, the 20-period smooth moving average, and then this here, the 200-day simple moving average. Both of these historically have acted as great levels of support and resistance. The 20-day smooth moving average is great during trending markets, which, as you can see here, we are trending and we're finding a bit of support at this level. The 200-day simple moving average is more of a magnet for prices, CJ and I like to say. And whenever price gets too extended from those levels, it tends to snap back to those levels. And as you can see here, those liquidations brought us right back to parity with this 200 simple moving average. So now today, we're right on the verge of these critical levels. And if we break below, then you can expect these levels to act as resistance going forward over the weekend and perhaps early into next week. These levels will flip from support to resistance. So I think it's critical today that we close above this candle. I think that could set us up for perhaps some nice price action this weekend. But the fact of the matter is, if we close below these moving averages, then I think a retest of 4,200 or 4,250, where we wick down to right here, is definitely in the cards as soon as Sunday. So watch the Bitcoin chart today. Wherever we close could definitely be indicative for the direction of price this weekend.
Well, I'm going to throw one out here, guys, from Standard Chartered. A friend of mine used to be a high-level person there, so I know a lot of people at the bank. And Jon Najarian, she is not Armenian. I suspect that's a Sri Lankan or Indian name, but it sounds a lot like Armenian. Nonetheless, brilliant lady, news junkie. For Markets Insider, she wrote that Standard Charter is publishing that they think Bitcoin goes to 100,000 by the end of this year or very early next year, and that Ethereum is 10x from here. Probably not until the middle or end of 2022, but they have a $35,000 target on Ether. So two pretty bullish calls, and not coming from the usual suspects like Max Kaiser or Stock to Flow or any of those folks. This is from pretty much staid bank that has their analysts out there saying, man, we think adoption and all the rest. What was it, guys? And just this week, Panama, Cuba, obviously El Salvador actually did it, but several other communities, countries in the Southern Hemisphere are looking to adopt Bitcoin as a currency. The more that happens, the less power some of the localized governments have. And again, that would also be pretty interesting going forward. So just kind of throwing those out to you. I think those are bullish calls by these folks. And we'll see how that plays out. But I like it. And I certainly think that they could be on the right track.
Yeah, that's really interesting, John. I saw that as well. It's always worth noting the source of the information. And like you said, Standard Charter, that's not, they're not out just putting wild estimates. That's a very grounded estimate. And one thing they looked at is what CJ and I were just talking about, and is sort of that flow of capital between retail traders and long-term holders, and just how much of Bitcoin's supply is locked away for the long term by some of those hodlers, those whales that are just moving Bitcoin off exchanges into cold storage. But also, that price prediction brings up some really interesting points. I think ETH potentially making a 10x move really puts into context a lot of the other moves we've seen in other assets like Solana and Cardano. People are wondering where Solana goes from here. Well, if ETH makes a 10x move, I don't see any reality where Solana doesn't move up relative to that move as well. So, CJ, any thoughts on kind of how some of these alts that have been performing very well over the last couple of weeks may perform end of year if these price predictions ring true?
I agree with you. I mean, I can't imagine a world where ETH trends wildly and doesn't bring up things like ADA, Solana, and potentially even Binance Coin, BSC. if that becomes an alternative. I think what we saw in the space of having those high gas fees, and if Ethereum goes up to those levels, gas fees are going to get very high. So individuals will look for alternatives when they're doing swaps on Uniswap and other various DEXs. And I think that opens the door for a lot of opportunity in Solana, and potentially a lot of those other utility blockchains. Right now, however, I do think Solana is a little bit faded. You look at ADA and what it did. I think that Solana will probably follow with something similar and pull back. Doesn't mean I am not bullish on the fundamentals of the project. I think it's great what Amelia Research and FTX have done, really embracing Solana, building on it. And when you look at all of the interesting projects in that ecosystem, I think there's a lot to be excited about in the long term.
Absolutely. And, CJ, you're talking about Solana being a bit overextended right now. I'd be inclined to agree with you. Any inclination of where we might find some support here? I've seen some numbers tossed around like 149 as a possible level of support. Any levels you'll be looking at this weekend?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just looking at my chart a little bit. I would say 140, 145. That's the first area of support. But I mean, this is such a parabolic run. If you were to compare this to the levels in which ADA pulled back, I think a comparable pullback in Solana would be about to that 140 level. So doesn't mean we fully get it. Why don't I just pull up the chart to give a better visualization? So first, we're just looking at ADA, and you can see that this one started to see some weakness, got the bearish engulfing candle, and then pulled back to that moving average. We're very overextended when it comes to Solana relative to that same moving average. But I don't think we're going to pull back all the way. I mean, that would be at 100. That would be quite the retrace. However, I think if we can go and just draw some of these Fibonacci extensions, it'll show us where we can have some quality support. And one of those levels ends up being around the 120, but also then we'll have more going up to like the 140 level as well. There we go. That's one I was looking for. So yeah, the 150, roughly in that vicinity. These are really the critical levels for Solana if this pullback is to continue.
Thank you for that, CJ. And one last thing I want to share before we wrap up today's show is, well, just thinking about Solana. I mean, this thing has been on a meteoric rise, and it's become the fourth largest crypto asset by market cap. So if we do get a correction there, I think that could have a significant effect on this chart here, Bitcoin dominance. And we've been talking about Bitcoin dominance a lot this week. And right now it's retesting a very critical level of about 40%, a level that for me is marked as kind of a breakdown level. I'm anticipating a bounce here. One thing that CJ and I have been talking a lot about is kind of what we have seen historically after those sort of leverage liquidations. And one thing we saw back in November of 2020 was Bitcoin leading the charge following those liquidations. And after that point in time, we really saw some retail mania come in, but not until after Bitcoin showed strength following those liquidations. So I think that if we do see a correction in Solana, that in itself could be enough to drive Bitcoin dominance back up to about, the 44% range, if we assume that Bitcoin holds relatively steady around 45 to 42K. And if that does happen, I would not be surprised to see Bitcoin, perhaps break into the 50K levels. And then we see the alts start to rip as the Bitcoin dominance hits some resistance around this 20-period smooth moving average. So lots of interesting stuff to look for. Bitcoin itself hitting some critical levels, but also Bitcoin dominance hitting some very critical levels here at about 40%. So just wanted to bring that up quickly.
Don't forget.
Yeah, go ahead, CJ. I'll let you go.
Don't forget, if you're looking for a new crypto broker, definitely go and check out Voyager. You can earn up to 12% interest on Polkadot, 10% on USDC, and a variety of others. If you sign up with the code Rebel25, they will give you $25 free in VGX when you sign up. So definitely check out Voyager. They are the sponsor of this show. And if you'd like to hear more insights, technical analysis, education on our platform and our community, check out marketrebellion.com/try crypto. That's where Monty and I pretty much live in the chat. We are there to do technical analysis and answer various questions. So make sure you check that out as well. And please like and subscribe. We really appreciate that. But wonderful day. Looking forward to a good weekend, and hope you guys are doing well wherever you are in the world.
Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you again on Monday. Take care.
See you Monday. Thank you.